Well, good morning, friends. We're here with Will Williman to talk about the book that he co-wrote with Stanley Hauerwas, known to all of you, Resident Aliens. Thanks, Will, for being with us and coming.
It's wonderful to be with you, and thanks for using the book.
You bet. I thought we could begin this morning by just talking about a distinction that is both presupposed by the book and runs all the way through it, and that is critical to the way that you think about church and articulate the adventure that we're on when we're doing church, and that is the church world distinction. I just wondered if you could start in a little bit on that and how that distinction between church and world is important for the book, but also today, in which it has incredible relevance.
I think we make a big deal out of the kind of church world distinction. We wrote this as a couple of mainline Protestant Methodist types, and basically mainline Protestantism, I think, sort of assumed that the North American world in which we operated was kind of our world. It was one in which the church was deemed to be socially significant. And in a way, the church project was to kind of help you fit into this world. I know as a teenager, there was something United Methodist Church offered for youth called Sex and the Whole Person. And it basically the theme of the class was, sex is good, God created it, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. And I took that course 4 times and inculcated that message thoroughly. The reality was we really didn't need to church teach us that, because that was what was already teaching us. And in Resident Aliens, we talk about it. At some point, North American Christians started waking up and realizing it was no longer our world. We were beginning to feel like missionaries in the world we thought we owned. And that's new. And that was an inside church and world. And we argued that sort of rather than training us to fit better into the world as it was given to us, the church would do better to draw proper distinctions between church and world, and giving us the skills we needed to resist the world. Right before I wrote this with Stanley, I was pastor in Greenville, South Carolina, and my church was next door to the synagogue in Greenville. We shared the parking lot, and it was great because you only had to own half the parking lot, and you got to have the whole parking lot. And the Jews parked in it on Fridays and Saturdays, and we parked in it on Sundays, and it was wonderful. And the rabbi and I used to meet together on Mondays, and I remember one Monday the rabbi saying to me, "It is so hard to be a Jew in Greenville. We're constantly having to tell our kids, hey, that's fine for everybody else. That's not fine for you. You're a Jew." And I said, "Rabbi, you're not going to believe this, but I had very much that same conversation with my own children just this week." And thus, I think we said in Resident Aliens, there's a sense in which the North American church is going to feel more like the synagogue as we move into the future. So that church world distinction is something that I think is kind of new for mainline Christians to think about. And just to say, now as Stanley is fond of saying, the trouble with American Christians is we can't tell the difference between being the church and being America. That there's a difference between the kingdom of God and the United States. And that's that kind of distinction.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that come to mind from the book, listening to you talk. The first one is this line where you say that North America is one of the most difficult mission fields the church has ever attempted. And the second one is a theme, I suppose, that is in the book, both in relation to the adventure of the biblical story gives us and so on. And that's where you say that the posture of the church really is not a defensive posture in this church world distinction, but is an offensive posture. And I wondered if you could talk about sort of those two things, North America, our current context, and the church as being active or defensive in its church, in its posture, and how those relate to the church.
I feel we're probably indebted for that insight about North America being a missionary context to Leslie Newbigin, the great
That's right.
mission bishop. And yeah, you know, Newbigin had the experience of being bishop in India. Then he comes back to England and he thinks, oh, I'm coming into this secular context, this godless context of England. Well, he woke up one day and realized, wow, this is a lot more like India than I thought. That it's not that 20th century English people are not religious, is that they're in a sense hyper-religious. They'll worship anything if given half a chance to worship something. And so that becomes a peculiarly challenging missionary situation in that we're not competing, it's not belief competing against unbelief. It's belief going head to head with belief.
Yeah.
And Christianity, having been influenced by European, North American culture, having deceived ourselves into thinking, oh, we can work this culture to our advantage, forgot there was any dissonance between the cultural context and the ecclesial context. Well, that's being rediscovered. And I notice, I remember, I served as a chaplain for 20 years, college chaplain at Duke Chapel. And I remember almost as if it were the day that I woke up and realized, what am I doing here in the middle of Duke University? Am I a pastor? No, I mean, they don't recognize me as a pastor. Am I a kind of a third-rate university administrator? Am I a sometime professor? And I woke up and realized, wow, I'm a missionary in a context that doesn't know who I am, what I'm talking about, and maybe doesn't even want me to be here. And for me, that was a foundational insight. I didn't tell the president that I was actually an evangelist and a missionary because I didn't want to lose my job. But that was my self-understanding, and that and that's different. I mean, missionaries, for instance, when preachers get together, a lot of times we complain about biblical illiteracy. We complain that people are no longer well-formed in the faith. Well, no missionary is ever dumb enough to complain about that. The missionary thinks that's the job, you know. And so that missionary understanding, I think, is very important for pastors. And I remember, a student coming out of Duke Chapel and saying, where did you get this stuff? I've never heard any of this stuff. I don't understand this stuff. And I asked, what did you score on the SAT? And the student says, well, 1350. I said, well, that's just average here at Duke. But where the heck would you have heard this stuff? Watching TV? I said, there are powerful forces to make darn sure you never hear any of this stuff.
That's right.
You get dressed and come down here at an inconvenient hour of the week to hear this stuff. This is knowledge that is unavailable to 9 out of 10 Americans. Well, anyway, that kind of missionary understanding, and it's particularly North America in its own way is challenging. I notice I've done some work like in Honduras, taking Duke students down there on short-term mission trips and all. And we come back and I remember an evening talking to a pastor evangelist in Honduras. And I said, gosh, I just admire you for how well you're working in in a context with such need and deprivation. And he said, really? He said, well, I admire you. He said, it's not that hard to preach the gospel in Honduras because people in Honduras have needs that the Bible cares about. But you got to preach to people who've solved all those needs with their checkbook. And I just don't know how you do it. I just admire you so much. I said, well, thank you. Well, he had a good point. And what was the second insight? I'm sorry to go on and on.
Oh, no, that's fine. You've been talking about both of them. It was about the church being on the offensive rather than defensive.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Some people accuse resident aliens of, oh, here's Harawash and Williman hunkered down behind the barricades. Oh, the world is such a wicked place and we got to resist it. To which we said, we're tenured professors at Duke Damn University. Is that not worldly enough for you? Come on. Christians do not have the privilege of being on the defensive. We got to be on the offensive. And, Matthew 28, where Jesus says, okay, folks, the world is a terrible place. Be careful. I want you to get some real estate, and then I want you to build a big building and then lock it down and keep yourself safe. No, Jesus says, get out of here. And don't just stay in Judea either. I own it all, and I want it all back. Go. And so we got to be evangelists. We got to be missionaries, whether we want to or not. And one of the great things I think Stanley had shown is Christians don't need to be intellectually intimidated by the world. We can go head to head with the world intellectually, but we also can go head to head with the world institutionally, morally. For instance, Greg Barnes, president of Princeton, had an article in the Christian Century some time ago saying that it's kind of sad to watch America unable to have an honest discussion about race. But remember now, America doesn't know about a God who forgives sinners. So that means that their discussion is going to be limited. And he made the point, there's a sense in which there's some difficult conversations you can only have at church. And maybe the church should say to people things like, you're concerned about the history of racism in America and all, well, come to the church. We're actually free space that can have honest conversations because we know a God that enables us to tell the truth about ourselves. Well, I like that offensive. I don't remember that specifically, but I'm glad you picked that up.
Well, I thought it was crucial, precisely for the reason that you named a second ago, to understand that point for the reading of the book, because there has been a kind of caricature of the book as a let's withdraw into our own enclave, which if people read the book carefully is nothing like what you and Stanley are arguing. And so it seems.
Yeah, I mean, as a little example was, again, being a chaplain at Duke and not knowing what's my role here, what am I to do here. I think that sometimes I would forget Duke is God's world too. And God, first Bible verse I ever learned by heart was John 3:16. For God so loved people who are spiritual like me and look like me. No, God says, I'm loving the whole world. I didn't die for the church. I died for the world. And I had these wonderful moments as a university chaplain where I'd go out and say, why am I going to speak to this fraternity tonight, this godless bunch of pagans? I can't believe I'm wasting my energies over there. And I would go out and to have some discussion about they drank too much or they were sexually promiscuous or to hammer them for their moral thoughts. Only in the discussion, they wanted to talk about God. And they said, you're supposed to know about God. Come on, hand over what you know. tell us. And I'd leave the meeting that evening and say to the Lord, you did that to make me look stupid, didn't you? And the Lord was saying, I'm sorry, they're mine too. Now, will you get out of your defensive posture and join me in my big retake of the world? Come on.
We probably have time just for one more question, Will, but the one that is coming to mind from the book has to do with the question of truth. One of the things that you've been saying this morning and that you say in the book is that the point is not to be in church because church is good for people, or the point is not that the church is critical for the world because the church is good for the world. The point is that the church is a claim that this is where the truth is, and that if you want to hear the truth, as you said, in an inconvenient hour and obtain the knowledge that is not otherwise available, then the church is the place to hear that word. So in our culture, truth with the capital T is sort of fallen on hard times. Not just
I was thinking, Gavin, when you said, it isn't the church is good for you. It isn't the church is good for the betterment of the world. In making that statement, you have ruthlessly criticized about 90% of all the sermons that we preach. And, but you're right. And I don't think I articulated this clearly enough, but I'm really concerned that the gospel is being presented as something that's good for you. And Sam Wells, I think, notes in a book that previously, when apologetics got started, like in the 18th century and all, the apologetic appeal was Christianity is reasonable. Now listen to me redescribe it, and see, it makes sense. It's reasonable. Well, sometime around in the 20th century, we started saying, we stopped saying Christianity is reasonable. We started saying Christianity is good for you. Where do you hurt? Okay, well, Jesus cares about that. I was talking to a pastor early in the pandemic, and he said, that damn pandemic has ruined about 90% of my sermons from last year. He said, I'm not proud of this, but I actually preached a sermon second week of January. I actually preached a sermon, how to find more joy in your marriage. And he said, then the pandemic came, and suddenly it was life, it was death, and he said, I think it's driven me back to important preaching. Well, maybe this is an opportunity for us to recover that I don't know whether Jesus will help or not. I do think, though, that's not the church's claim. The church's claim is he just happens to be the truth about God. This is who God really is, and this is what God is up to. And part of what God's up to is to hitch you on to God's projects, that's otherwise known as discipleship. And I think that's really important. And this notion of, hey, are you anxious? Would you like to find deeper meaning in your life? Would you like to have a purpose-driven life? You know more about the New Testament than I, but I just don't find any of that in the New Testament. And as a woman told me, she asked me a question. She was suffering from a debilitating illness, and she said, how come Jesus didn't heal everybody that was sick? And I said, well, I guess that's true. He healed a lot of people, but he didn't heal everybody, I guess. And she said, well, I've been waiting for him to heal me so I could be a better disciple. As it turns out, he doesn't care. He's made me a disciple when I'm still sick. And I said, wow, what a beautiful rendition of, I think that is a claim that we cannot weasel out of, and that is, I don't know whether this will make your life more fulfilling or not. It could make your life a lot more difficult. But whether it does or not, it just happens to be the truth.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ is not only the way and the life, he is the truth. And so, but what a joy. And I just close by saying, when I became a bishop, and being embedded in the daily life of the church again in a way I wasn't before, I became concerned that it seemed like most pastors had reduced the Christian ministry to caregiving, pastoral care, mercy gifts, ambulance chasing, hand-holding, soothing the anxieties of older adults. Well, when I came into ministry, not to be sentimental about it, but when I came into ministry in South Carolina in 1971, I thought I was going into a war. I expected to receive opposition because the ministers that were my mentors had all received opposition. And that, in other words, I was glad that ministry was not simply about caring for other people's needs. It was about the truth. It was about stating the truth in a culture that loves lies. And to me, that's the most invigorating aspect of ministry. And the best reason for being in ministry is God wants people to know the truth.
I think that's a great place to end. Will, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's terrific. And we will really enjoy discussing this book. Take care.